Good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming out tonight. I'll call to order this study session for Tuesday, January 30th, 2024. Will you please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Clerk, can you all call the roll, please?
Mayor Korsbeck.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Grace.
Here.
Trustee Hardy.
Yes.
Trustee Ayers.
Here.
Trustee Murphy.
Here.
Trustee Kurtz.
Here.
And Trustee Albrecht is absent this evening.
Thank you, Clerk. This being a study session, we won't have any general public comment, but given the attendance tonight, and I talked to the other trustees here, we'll open up each agenda item for public comment, and then also we will not have reports at the end too. So we'll jump right in, and we'll start with the short-term rental regulation update. Ton Hildebrand, Senior Planner.
Yes,
Okay.
yes indeed.
Get the
Thank
title
you.
right.
Well, good evening, Mayor and trustees. It's good to be here to have this conversation with you guys tonight.
Thank you.
So, as you likely recall, during the work session in November of last year, the town board discussed the town's current regulations for short-term rentals, common issues related to short-term rentals, and common practices by other jurisdictions to mitigate those issues, and possible options for town regulations. Following a discussion with staff, the town board decided to move forward with allowing short-term rentals within the town and requested the development of short-term rental regulations to help ensure the health and safety of the renters while managing impacts to neighboring, surrounding neighbors. The intent of tonight's work session is to provide an update on the short-term rental regulations project since the work session in November. And this evening, we will discuss essentially the project kickoff with an introduction of the short-term rental regulations webpage, the launch of a community questionnaire to collect feedback on short-term rentals, a draft of short-term rental regulations and topic for further discussion, and then next steps. So as the short-term rental regulation project kickoff, I would like to introduce the short-term rental regulations project webpage, which there's some little snippets here on the right side of the screen of that project webpage. The webpage is intended to provide project background, information on the draft documents, and then information about upcoming meetings and hearings to anyone who may be interested in the project. As information related to the project becomes available, notice and directions to access the information will be posted on the project webpage. Additionally, staff contact information is also provided on the webpage should any community member have questions, comments, or just would like some general information on the project overall. So there are two ways in which the project webpage can be accessed. The most direct would be to access the webpage link as seen in your packet and on the screen here, or likely the easiest way is to access the pages by visiting the Planning Department website under berthoud.org. And on that Planning Department webpage, there is a short-term rental regulations tab, and I have that highlighted here with the yellow arrow on the screen. And there is a direct link then to the project webpage. For those individuals active on social media, the webpage will be shared across the town's social media to promote the project in the coming days. As you all know, community engagement often creates more effective solutions and increases the likelihood that projects or solutions will be widely accepted. Additionally, working together improves communication and understanding between town staff, the town board, and the citizens of the community. With this in mind, staff would like to gather community feedback on short-term rentals prior to presenting the first draft of regulations. So with this in mind, staff has created a short community questionnaire with the intent of capturing community feedback on the topic of short-term rentals while also gathering the information needed to refine the preliminary draft of regulations. The questionnaire will take approximately 5 minutes to complete and will be available to the public starting February 1st and closing on February 16th. So the questionnaire will be available for a 2-week time span. There are two ways in which that one can access the questionnaire. The short-term rental regulations project webpage that I just previously introduced contains a link to the community questionnaire or by scanning the QR code seen in your packet or on the screen before you. As a soft launch or project kickoff, we have made the questionnaire available to the community starting this evening. So this this QR code that you see on the screen right now can be scanned by anybody joining us or tuning in today, including you all. So following the work session in November, staff developed a preliminary draft of short-term rental regulations. However, further refinement of the draft is needed prior to presenting the draft to the town board. The draft regulations address many of the common issues discussed during the work session in November. And as a recap, the common issues we discussed included saturation of short-term rentals in neighborhood environments, or density, loss of sense of community, parking, parties and events, amongst others. During the November work session, staff also provided suggested regulations based upon common practices amongst other communities to address the common issues discussed. The primary draft regulations have incorporated many of the suggested regulations, including approval and licensing requirements, establishing a maximum occupancy limit per short-term rental, and defining an absolute maximum night or number of guests that cannot be exceeded, specifying minimum off-street parking standards, general rules of conduct for guests, requirements for property manager and neighbor notification, creating a standard that restricts the short-term rental from being used as an event space, requirement for life safety inspection at initial licensing and on an annual basis, and then penalties for violations. As previously mentioned, many of the suggested regulations are currently seen in other communities' short-term rental regulations, and therefore these regulations are considered industry standard. And additionally, these standards are often recognized as being reasonable and fair. Because many of these regulations are industry standard, further discussion on these items may not be necessary moving forward. However, one issue of concern is more complex and is not consistently addressed by all communities with short-term rental regulations. And that issue is the saturation of short-term rentals in neighborhood environments, or density issues. So common approaches to addressing this issue include establishing a cap and or separation requirements, defining primary residence, and or limiting the number of nights rented per year. It is staff's intent to provide several options for regulation addressing these issues with the first draft and to discuss those in further detail with the town board at the next short-term rental work session. The input we receive from the questionnaire is very valuable and may help guide the conversation on this topic. So next steps, as previously mentioned, the questionnaire will be open from February 1st through the 16th. Upon closing of the questionnaire, staff will compile all feedback and comments and provide that in a single document, which will be made available to the public as well as the town board. We will then discuss that in detail with the town board at the next work session, and much of the feedback we hope to receive will be reflected in the first draft of regulations. So again, our intent is to come back to you at the next work session and have an in-depth conversation over the first draft of regulations. So in the meantime, while this questionnaire is open, staff will continue to do some research on common practices related to density. And then, like I said, we'll come back to you and have further discussion. So in closing, I leave you with just a reminder for the project information webpage as well as the survey. And I'm available for any questions or, any discussion you would like to have.
Thank you. Trustees, questions? If you don't have any, do we mind if we open it up to the public for questions before we do comments? Sure. Okay.
Excellent.
At this time, if we all open up to the public, I'm gonna forget names, I'm sorry, it's been a couple months. Mr. Evans?
Should I come up there?
Yes, please come to the front here, and if you could state your name and address as well, thank you.
So I'm John Evans. I live at 3252 Donzante Bay down in Heron Lakes. And first of all, I reached out to Chris and found out about this meeting, and glad we were able to attend. And Tom, thank you for the presentation. Two things regarding the presentation. One, is the presentation going to be posted on the website, or can we get a copy of it?
I certainly do it.
Okay. And then second, and I just tried to pull up the QR code and I couldn't tell if it was active or not, but in the questionnaire, is there a section in there that allows kind of for open comments? Or is it kind of structured questions and, there's not a lot of variability in the responses?
There is a variety of both, and there is at the very end of the questionnaire, there is an opportunity to provide additional comments. So if any of the questions don't address some of your concerns, you can provide open comment. And then it also does provide an opportunity to provide contact information for yourselves, so email essentially, so that you can be added to a contact list. So that when we do share information on the project, I can at least reach out to those individuals who've provided their contact information. And again, I would highly suggest going out to the project webpage because there is an email for myself. So again, if the survey doesn't cover, the questionnaire, if it doesn't cover something, certainly feel free to send me comments directly through email.
Okay, appreciate that. I want to speak on my behalf because, we've been pretty vocal, we've been here, and, we're going to continue to participate in this entire process because I think collectively, and there's a lot of us from Heron Lakes here tonight to just understand what's happening and how things are progressing. And that's very important to us because, we want to preserve the sense of community and why we came here. And not just for Heron Lakes, but for the town of Berthoud. And so, we want to be actively engaged. And so the survey for me is a good way to start. But, we're going to plan to be here all along and through the process. So
Certainly.
thanks for your time.
Glad to have you. Anyone else? Okay. Close public comment, bring it back. Any questions now after public comment regarding this?
I guess I have one question. So just kind of thinking about our different, our land use code and land use map and everything, I know you're still working on refining the draft policy, but is it one size fits all or will it be different, say, for the core of Berthoud, like, the neighborhoods north and south of Mountain Avenue versus a Heron Lakes or, a more traditional suburban style neighborhood?
It's a good question. So as of right now, the preliminary draft would be, there would be specific zone districts on our use table that would allow them through the approval process, which would be a license approval. But the standards essentially would be across the board. So these are what like I was stating previously, a minimum parking, so based upon the quantity or the guest count. So it would then determine what quantity of parking you need to provide. But overall, a lot of the regulations that we're looking at currently, essentially on the grand scheme, look to protect the safety and welfare of not only the guests, but also the community on the whole. So, and that's what you generally see across the board in most jurisdictions, is that it's really hard to say, okay, this is for this specific type of neighborhood, and then this is for a downtown area, and this is for the rural areas. That can be really challenging to then draw those lines and to define exactly what those edges are. And so you usually do see it's applicable to any and all STRs across the board, regardless of what neighborhood they're in, as long as they're allowed by that zone district. So there may be some zone districts that we say an agricultural zone district, maybe we don't want to see them in the agricultural zone district. So there'll be an opportunity to have that discussion. And of course, we wouldn't normally see these in, say, like one of our industrial zone districts because single family dwellings aren't allowed in industrial. So yeah, you won't, unless we decide to move forward with something like a separation requirement or a cap, especially a cap, that's when we will really have to discuss how to define that cap. Because if it's by neighborhood, again, one of the challenges is that how do we define that? It may be easy, such as Heron Lakes, because Heron Lakes is a newer development and we know those parameters. But then when you look at the downtown core area, it's much harder to say, well, where are the edges within the downtown core? So those are some of the challenges we'll have to work through if we decide to move forward with a cap.
But those are some things like if we decided not to do a cap on our general town board one, each of those individual HOAs or metro districts could append and put in their own
Correct.
more
Yep.
strict regulations.
Yep, so we could decide to not put in a cap and that, but then yes, HOAs can come in and put in place more restrictive regulations within their own communities.
Trustee Murphy?
Just to piggyback on that, might be getting ahead of myself. Regarding caps and density, have you and staff kind of explored kind of what's going on in Colorado? Do you have an opinion on kind of what direction we should go with that, or how we can actually frame that?
So I do have actually quite a bit of experience in that. When I was with Larimer County and drafting their short-term rental regulations, that was one of the many topics that they discussed. And they ended up not going with a cap for the reasons I was just discussing, is that it is hard to create boundaries when it comes to a cap. But they did implement a separation requirement, so essentially one approved short-term rental cannot be within 500 feet of another approved short-term rental. So you don't get, neighboring one property surrounded by short-term rentals essentially. There are other communities in northern Colorado that do have caps. Timnath is one of them. They base theirs on certificate of occupancy. So, and it's 1%. So again, it's easier when it is a new subdivision, and you'll have 100 new homes, and so there you go. You got your one. So, so there's that approach, and again, that's I think a little bit easier maybe for them. I'm not sure. It would be interesting to see how that is working out. Trying to think. There's other communities. Fort Collins doesn't have a cap, but they are very restrictive. It is only specific zone districts. I believe it's like 1 or 2 residential zone districts and that's it. So they're very restrictive in that manner. But then there are other communities across Colorado where I have seen a cap and separation together. I know Manitou Springs does a separation, and I want to say they have an altogether overall cap. Estes Park and Estes Valley have a combined cap. So Larimer County implements a portion, but it's an overall cap. It's not specific to neighborhood or so it's very diverse when you do see it, how people or how communities are implementing it. So it will be a very, I think, interesting conversation, and there's a lot of complexities to a separation in a cap.
Would you agree that a cap is maybe the common trend as not being a popular option?
I would agree, yes, just it is not as common to see compared to some of the others, and I think a separation is also not commonly seen.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I do have just kind of one follow-up question on that. If we, whatever, I guess, system we get to, whether it's a cap or there's gonna be a limit, right, on the total number of STRs in Berthoud, is there, I guess on the other side of it, are we going to require them to show that they're actually an active short-term rental? I guess what I'm thinking of is, there was a time before my family found our home in Berthoud, we were considering moving to a mountain community, and in a lot of the real estate listings to kind of prop up the property value, they would say, and this has an STR license, or, as kind of like an asset, but if it's not being utilized, that's kind of taking away from somebody else, so, kind of prevent the hoarding of licenses in a way. So.
Yeah. And that is definitely a challenge that I have also been familiarized, is transferability essentially of that license or that land use approval. If we approach it based upon our previous conversation in a work session, and I think the direction that we would likely go, and of course will be left to you all to decide, but to approach it from a license, that what your approval is actually, you are acquiring a license, and with that license then you are required then to renew every year, and that license would not be transferable as licenses generally aren't. So if you lapse and don't renew, then, and again, if there was a cap, then that would open up that availability for somebody else to get approval. But yes, that is a concern that many communities do see, is that people, and I've heard, I don't know how true it is, I've heard complaints that individual property owner will get approval for short-term rental, won't use it as a short-term rental, only so that they can then tack that on to their sale or show that in their advertising that they have this approval. So it could potentially raise, you know, what they get,
Value.
the value, yeah.
How much is that?
Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Really appreciate the forethought here with having our own website on this.
Yeah.
The QR code, versus just kind of calling around and stuff. So I think this is a great start. So thank you, staff, on this. And for Mr. Evans and all the residents and friends of Don Zonte Court, I very much welcome you guys to be here. I think we all do. It's encouraging to have you here. I don't think we'd be doing this if it wasn't for you, and we'll be a better community afterwards. So please keep showing up.
Mayor Karspeck, if I may, there's just kind of, I'd like to share one thing with you, if I may. We don't currently allow short-term rentals, as you know, that is not an allowed land use in the code. There were some that were operating. There are some still that show up on websites. We don't know if they're still operating. In some cases, they blocked out all the reservation dates. In some cases, they are continuing to take reservations in the future, hoping that they will be allowed to use them, but not in the short term. And in some cases, they may be continuing to operate irrespective of our prohibition or even code enforcement actions. So it's kind of an evolving target as we try to find ways to regulate. Permitting will help that in the future. If you're not permitted, then you're not legal, right? And that would be an easy step. One unintended potential consequence that's occurred as part of our kind of more stringent enforcement of our current code relates to the golf tournament. And that's something that impacts Heron Lake, specifically with the community as a whole. There are a lot of short-term rental bookings that had to be canceled as a result of that because we don't have lodging in town. And so it may be something the board wants to keep in mind, that in the context of the golf tournament or maybe some of the other big events we have that might draw folks from out of town, even birthday days, I think, might draw folks from out of town that want to come and be with family and stay. And just thinking about timeline in terms of process, the sooner we get it done, the sooner those things can move forward, if that's the will of the board. So I just wanted to be kind of aware of the fact that there have been some unintended consequences, again, because we don't have any other lodging options locally. And so as we move through this process, to the extent that we can do it quickly, I think that's a good thing for all of us. But at the same time, it's more important that we get it right. So you know, we'll try to be diligent about moving this forward and continuing to kind of bring it to you and get these things going and done. But just thinking about that in the back of your mind as we move forward, those might be things you want to be cognizant of.
Can I ask the question? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, it's kind of to jump into that one. I know previous conversations I've had elsewhere, I'm actually not aware. Do we currently have a lodging tax?
I was just gonna bring that up.
Yeah.
Mark Chaffee's been in several times before we passed it.
We do have a
He
lodging
thinks we
tax.
should have a lodging tax.
Okay, so we do have a lodging tax.
We do.
Has it been updated within the past reasonable amount of time, or?
No, our lodging tax is pretty consistent with those around us. You know, it's not like Disneyland where you're paying, 14% lodging tax or whatever. Ours is 3%, and that's pretty consistent, or maybe it's 4%.
And it's written to apply to short-term.
I think it's
rentals,
4%, sorry, I said
not
3%.
just hotel lodging or.
It would absolutely apply to short-term rentals in our opinion. I mean, that would be part of our regulatory framework. These are certainly operating like a hotel and should pay lodging tax, yeah. Or collect and remit lodging tax.
So that's one thing about like Airbnbs and VRBO, they usually go around and find out what the lodging taxes are. Were these facilities that were operating before collecting that tax?
We did, I did talk to Cindy, our finance director. We actually did receive a lodging tax payment from one short-term rental in town, but the others, to my knowledge, were not collecting or remitting lodging tax.
Just probably the question that folks might not want to answer, but I definitely appreciate the talking about schedule. So I didn't know if Ton or somebody could comment on like an approximate schedule or a range. Assuming the board doesn't ask for 17 work sessions, what we might be looking at. So.
I mean, Ton can certainly comment on that. I know the county process was extensive.
Yeah.
I don't think that we're gonna need to go through that level
Sure,
of detail, I hope.
Yeah.
Lots of others have kind of done it before us, and so hopefully we can piggyback on that.
Cookie cutter it.
But as you all know, these kinds of processes don't go quickly.
Sure.
Yeah, certainly, my experience with the county, it took over a year to go through the entire process. There was very complex, I think, just because of the size of Larimer County, but also there's the complexity of the Estes Valley, which is very unique, and I would say fortunately, we don't have that challenge. So following the questionnaire, I would say it may take 2 to 3 weeks to process the feedback, and that's just really dependent upon how many participants and the extent of what is provided in feedback. And then, as I said, I already have a preliminary draft pretty much ready to go with a few lingering things in this additional research. So I would think that if we really do, like I said, some of these issues of concern, if we do acknowledge those as being more industry standard, and in my experience, I would like to think I'm not throwing anything in there that's crazy or out of the ordinary. So if those are things that we don't really need to discuss extensively, and we focus on primarily these, the major issue of density and a cap and what have you, then I think certainly this could be a relatively quick process. And then keeping in mind that once the regulations are adopted, those individuals who may be on pause currently will need to come in and submit an application and go through the review process and all that, which of course we're sorting out what that will look like on the policy end internally. But that is something too, that time frame will also be there. So, but I'm hopeful that this can be easy and smooth and we can do this quickly, and hopefully a lot of my background in this can make that so. So.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Already shown. Excellent. Well, thank you, everyone. We can just move on to our second agenda item tonight, which is the update in the Sustainable Development Policy. Pardon me, Master Plans update.
Good evening. So what you have before you is an update to the comprehensive plan action items. You saw this a couple months ago. And then we expanded this, Jeremy Olinger, as well as Keith Knoll and I got together and we updated your packet. It also includes then the open space master plan action items, the trails master plan action items, and under construction is the First Street overlay action items that will be incorporated. And how staff uses these again is in our budgeting process and our work planning process, we take a look at where are there overlaps. And there are probably 3 to 5 items that are in the trails plan, that are in the open space plan, that are in the comprehensive plan. And so we're just putting together multidisciplinary teams to work on these together. But I wanted you to see there's a lot that we're working on now. There's a lot to do. So this is job security for staff members at Town of Berthoud. And then also listening to some of the previous discussion on sustainability and net zero and resilient construction, it really prompted staff to take a look at what do those terms really mean when it comes to applying to a community. And one of the pages in your packet, the United Nations defines net zero very differently than Lead Green Council, than even the Office of Army Installations and NRAIL. And so then the town participated on the outs, kind of sitting on the sidelines. There was a consortium of communities in this area that did review on sustainable building practices. And the town of Berthoud participated. It was a couple years ago, and again, we sat on the fringe of that, and we watched what other communities were doing. And what the town of Berthoud is doing is actually quite similar to what those communities are already doing. And their way of addressing sustainability and net zero is purely from a building process. And that really is, unless you're starting out with a greenfield development, it's very hard to retrofit existing structures. inexpensively. So we just took one of the items that I want you to make sure that you see are all of the things, it's like there's the United Nations definition, go ahead.
We can't see anything. Are we supposed to be looking at the
Oh,
Excel
this is in your
spreadsheet?
packet.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
Is there a
yeah.
way we can get it on for for everyone? You can keep going, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Okay, that's okay. I don't have several different areas of concentration. And again, this is global. This isn't just dealing with only buildings. And then there's LEED certified cities, and that does deal with communities, but it's more from a neighborhood standpoint. And again, that greenfield versus brownfield. Thank you, Christian, and I'm sure you all can read that. But it's good to have it up there.
Oh, it is. We can read it. That's great.
Okay, and then, so the next one down under the LEED Greenfield Cities, Christian, if you'll scroll, I think to line, yeah, there you go, is how the town has just independently and organically started addressing some of these issues, but they're also direct outcomes of all of these master plans and direct outcomes of the town just looking forward into new ideas and sustainability. And again, you have the touchstones of community identity, resilience, and sustainability. So those are used when we're setting our goals as well, based on the direction everybody has provided us in these master plans. So you can see all of the different things the town is doing. One of the items in Q2, we're going to take a look at code clarification. We're taking a look at adopting the 2023 National Electrification Code. We have to before July 1st of this year. It's a state regulation for us. And we're gonna be taking a look at that and how does that compare to the 2021 code. Many communities adopted the International Building Code packets in their entirety. I know that we did amend some of those items out. We can take a look at what was amended out to determine the cost in order to implement those and balancing sustainable measures, balancing resiliency with affordable housing, creating community identity, connectivity, all of those items that we have to balance carefully. So these are projects that we have in the works that we are currently slated to perform this year and early next year. We just wanted to give this information to you. Again, it's a lot that we are, Mr. Olinger, Mr. Knoll and I are meeting about every quarter, we decided to just update our spreadsheet so then we can also give that to Administrator Kirk so that in his discussions with you all, we can, be transparent about how we're implementing the plans that we spent a lot of money in preparing. And then also, in here, one of the other items is occasionally the town, okay, let me find it. It is the sheet at the bottom that says code projects. It's the one to the left. Thank you, Christian. So these are all the code projects that we have in the works in the pipeline. And these are solely based on the action items listed in these master plans, as well as listening to, again, the goals of sustainability and resilience and how are we going to continue developing as a community. So part of what we're asking tonight is just concurrence that you're good with how we're implementing the master plans, that you understand we are looking at sustainability, resiliency, community identity, touchstones, and everything that we're doing on that implementation. We wanted to be able to communicate what's underway for code work. We're wanting to seek concurrence that this is the priority for code work going forward. And then just, are you all interested in us pursuing more review of our codes and policies when it comes to sustainability, resilience, and community identity, and just make sure that we're aligned there. And occasionally we do get requests from individuals who might want to do a project in the town of Berthoud, and right now our code doesn't allow particular types of development. Normally, communities don't do a spot zone or a target change to the code to allow a specific type of development. But if you're wanting us to entertain something like that, we definitely need to know how to shift around priorities, because it's not a priority in any of the master plans. We can entertain it, but definitely we're looking for your concurrence that we're on the right path and implementing the vision that the town of Berthoud felt was important during all the master planning processes.
Christian, can we go back to the sustainable policy tab and just, we can click back and forth between all these different tabs. As Ann mentioned, this was included in the packet, but I know it's a lot of information to digest. The easy place on the sustainability side, if you scroll down, Christian, or look through this kind of thought process here, are there things on this list that we want to prioritize? There's some of these things we're already doing. We can kind of walk you through some of those to the extent that those are helpful, kind of where our efforts have laid so far. A lot of it is building code related, but obviously we have some water efficiency programs, some other things that are non-energy related. But on the sustainability side in particular, do you want to dive into some of these topics in more detail? And if so, kind of we should talk about kind of what it would take to get there and where we are today and what we think it might take to get there.
I have a
Go
vague
ahead,
question, sorry. I have a vague question and I don't know if you can answer it because it's gonna be really vague. So, when making these priorities and when looking at best practices, et cetera, from the different sources, what kind of, weight are you guys putting on something that might be more expensive, harder to accomplish, but long-term better in regards to the requirements and to the needs of the community versus things that are basically following the requirements handed down to us?
That's a great question, and I can answer it pretty simply by saying it depends. And as far as, the action items, those are pretty easy. We go through the action items in the master plans and determine what we feel is most urgent, and then we go through the budgeting process. When it comes to this new item that we're looking at, which is the sustainable development, just the policy framework, we haven't started investigating any of that because number one, we wanted to make sure that everybody, the town trustees, you were all on board and you wanted us to start expending time to do so. Some of the work may be more intensive and maybe we could get a grant to hire an outside consultant to give us best management practices for a community like Berthoud, what would need to be implemented first, second, third, what are those pitfalls that we could learn from other communities? And it is a good question because long term, the United States has sustainability and net zero and resiliency goals. So what can we be doing in order to meet some of those goals? And what's the path of least resistance? And to tell you the truth, I don't know that tonight. We just wanted to put together a concept of this is what we're already doing and how far do you want us to go down this path, and identifying what some of those issues are. And our building official will help us, especially within National Electrification Code. I've already asked them to give us a list of the changes from the 2023 code, from the 2020 code to the 2023 code, what those look like, and a best guesstimate on what those costs are. And that we have no choice in adopting to be compliant with the state of Colorado. And so that will really be our first foray into trying to evaluate cost.
Go ahead, trustee Murphy, I'm gonna.
Oh, no, and thank you, Director Johnson and Administrator Kurtz for, entertaining this discussion, which I've been wanting to have since I joined the board. I brought to you guys a resolution for net zero construction by 2030, about a year ago. As kind of a very narrow focused kind of goal that we could set for ourselves. I feel like where we're tackling building codes, from the comp plan standpoint, I feel like that was kind of a oversight, which we kind of missed. But just looking at, kind of where we're at with all of our sustainability goals, and just obviously staff has plenty of work to do. And I'm happy with the prioritization. Going into net zero, I thought that was an additional tack on that would not hinder performance by the staff, I guess. More of like aggressively tackling these things every 3 years as the I codes come forth. But just thinking on this, I'm open to entertaining what the board's thoughts are on this, as well as staff, regarding what direction we go with this. I'm very passionate about sustainability, particularly from the building perspective. I think we can continue kind of in this more piecemeal way as we get to things. My concern from the building standpoint, obviously, we're putting up hundreds of houses in the next few years. I want to be aggressive with our energy efficiency, with our construction standards. So that's the concern and the urgency there. But one thing I've come across just researching stuff is a lot of towns will have like a climate action plan or a sustainability action plan, similar to the other documents we've done, where we could compile not only like the comp plan goals, but additional supplemental goals. I look at lead ratings for buildings as an area that we could maybe expand into. Certainly renewable energy, if that's something we wanted to entertain on a municipal level, I think that's maybe an addition we would maybe want to think about in the near future. But that was kind of another route. I thought, if you guys are swamped for work, and which, I know you are, and I know you're working your tails off, it's one thing where it's like, I would be certainly open to hiring a consultant to kind of take on that additional load if that is preferable to staff and the board. But
It's good.
I think this is a great area to really kind of dive into for us, Obviously, it doesn't take priority over pressing issues like STR. But I would entertain kind of both directions. I really appreciated when we brought up 2021, I think it was you, Mayor Carspect, who added the EV provisions as an afterthought.
Yeah, that was Jeff Hyman, and I'll speak, I totally agree with you. I think planning and zoning is one of our primary functions. So we've taken stabs over the years at bits and pieces, but you looking at this comprehensively, it's good. In my opinion, it's a good idea.
Well, I would entertain, either direction, whichever is more workable for staff. Instead of, compiling these kind of goals into a holistic document and farming it out, Or is it, continuing to kind of do these as we can, piecemeal? I'm open to either, I guess.
And if I may, a lot of communities do have a sustainability report card. Many of the activities that the town has been doing for the past several years, including implementation of the master plans, would funnel really nicely into a sustainability report card. And it would include things that, Keith's team and Paul and your wonderful staff and team leaders are already doing. The Arboretum concept, well, that's absorbing greenhouse gases right there. And so what are we doing towards those strides without having these formal, hard goals, but what can we do to be an example to other communities on what is possible? But a sustainability report card might actually be a good first step to determine, well, where are we? We might be further along that path than we know. And in doing all of this review, it was exciting to think, you know, gosh, we're really making good strides.
Kind of like a benchmarking study in a way, yeah, to compare us to, what is our role and what are other towns of kind of equal size in the Front Range or even the mountain communities doing, and kind of where do we land on the spectrum?
Yeah, and then make decisions about what do we want to do.
I think this actually fills that niche, because I know the comp plan was great. It had a huge amount of town identity, which was one of those big touchdowns. But the underpinning parts of the wastewater plan and the landscape using plan, a lot of that was going to be pulled in after the fact for both identity and sustainability and resiliency. I think to kind of Trustee Murphy's point, there's a lot of sustainability points here that kind of worked back into the comp plan. Like his point, we're going to be building hundreds of houses over the next year. The more efficient we can make it, the more resilient we get to be because we're consuming less. You name it. No, this is. I mean, the comp plan itself kind of knocked my socks off when I first saw it. It was amazing, and seeing what you guys can really work with when you've got those touchstones is honestly, we just try to stay out of your way because it's so cool. I think that's more than reasonable. Seeing what more sustainability we can build in, where it lives, where it needs to go. I know we've talked about a non-pot system, a townwide non-pot irrigation. I know it's up there with wishing for 2 unicorns as opposed to 1, but at the same time, it's not an impossibility. It's just really hard. So figuring out how we're going to plan that over time, I think on top of everything else, is a great plan.
Well, and this is, long-range planning is oftentimes a planner, this is where the vision is. This is where it's fun to imagine Berthoud in the future. And so, Ton's expertise and the whole team's expertise, not just in community development, but across every department, there's something here for everybody to work on.
Yeah, and you have it prioritized. I think non-pot, those kind of big things are great. It has a 3 on it, and then a couple years later, as long as we keep working on it, it turns into a 2 and then a 1 priority.
Try to get the ones done.
Try to get the ones done. Yeah. Trustee Murphy, did that question get answered of kind of prioritizing and hiring a consultant? Was that the question?
We can look at it a couple of ways from what I've seen, as you brought up, like annual kind of report card. Having a just sustainability focused document, is a way to kind of pull from our comp plan already and just kind of give it more focus on kind of the direction we want to tackle sustainability and resilience goals. And it isn't just community development, even though that I feel is a critical portion of it.
Yeah, sure.
I would love to see a document like that.
I think that'd be great.
Honestly.
That work for you guys?
Above and beyond, I think going through a checklist like this is really valuable. But I think having a bigger kind of overall vision of focus, sustainability, and resiliency goals, I think in a document form can kind of be that North Star for us, just like the comp plan has been. And a lot of it's going to be kind of duplication, I think. But there's also things like that I'd like to tackle from a board perspective above and beyond kind of what we're already tackling, I guess, on that front anyway.
I would support that. I think, the goal of developing a sustainability document, but I do like the idea of benchmarking, kind of taking our vitals, right, and finding out where we are, and then I guess also asking the real question of like what's in our locus of control. We're obviously we're a town, so we have a lot we can do, but we're dependent on a lot of other government entities.
We don't own our own grid or something.
Yeah. So what what do we get the benefit of if, say, the electric providers are going towards a net zero policy themselves, but really what can we affect and have the most impact on kind of what juice is worth the squeeze, so to speak, you know, with limited resources, say over the next 10 years. And yeah, so I agree. Developing some sort of plan that helps us prioritize that, and I mean, this right here, I mean, if we were to go outside to a consultant, they would be, you know, licking their chops over receiving something this well organized.
It really is.
They would it'd make
This is really
it a lot
great.
easier if we do go that route, so.
I think in our survey, our number one citizen feedback was sustainability, wasn't it?
In the comprehensive plan?
No, was it or the American Community Survey? We did one of them, we listed the top three, and I was always surprised that green or sustainability was way up there. I thought it was number one.
I don't think it was number one in the American Community Survey, but I do think it was higher on the list.
Okay.
I'd have to go back and look.
I was getting at, I think others would appreciate the report or the kind of, focusing just on the green or sustainability stuff, like a report card.
And it's another way to build community identity.
Mhm.
It's another way to get people involved and committed and, you know, have that sense of place and pride in the town of Berthoud and what we're doing. It's also a way to grow that community identity
I
and
agree.
who we are. And, you know, of course, those quality of life factors play in, you know, dark sky, access to the outdoors in structured and unstructured play areas, quality housing for everybody, mobility, all of those play into having a well-rounded community. And Berthoud there's just something really secret and special here, and yes, exactly.
We don't even talk about how
No.
very good. I'm kidding.
So
Is this
it's
being
good.
I agree.
The train at Wagner Farm Park,
Yeah.
future trains,
Trustee Murphy?
I think and I'm open to entertaining, you know, what the board's thoughts are on this, you know. I certainly think a sustainability plan goes beyond carbon emissions and, you know, tracking that. That's part of it. But it's much more, you know, land and water and resource sustainability. You know, generally, you know, financial stability of town, you know, and how wide we wanna make that or narrow we wanna make that, I think is up to us, but I think it's a worthwhile endeavor to dive into. Obviously we've got like priority issues right now that we're dealing with, but I think this can be one of those things that's kind of in the background that we're chugging away on until we have kind of a finalized document, I guess.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, I always think of sustainability, it's more expanded now, but like the three legs of the stool, there's this environmental aspect, which I think is what everybody thinks about, but there's the economic aspect and then the social aspect, and those three things come together to form a sustainable community.
Also,
And again, if I may.
No, absolutely.
I'd love to interrupt. One of the things that would be a sustainable outcome of developing a report card is have the consultant give us the tool at the end so that we can then update it every year. And we then become independent of that consultant need as well. So it could be a dashboard. Tawn brought up tonight, she was showing you the map, what is it called?
Story map.
Story map, thank you, a story map for the short-term rental project. So maybe we have a story map on the town's sustainability efforts. And it just becomes this living document that we're constantly updating. So I guess what I'm asking tonight is, do you all, you know, concur with a direction, going with a sustainability report card? How would you like to direct, you know, staff to investigate a little bit more? And then, are we on the right path with the list of code amendments? Would you like to consider anything else coming before you? Do you see something where we might have a gap?
I just had a question, when are you guys gonna tackle the 24 stuff?
The IBC?
The whole sweep, you know, it's just coming out.
So we looked, let's see, in 2022, I believe the town adopted the 21 codes. We haven't started looking at the 24 codes. We have to do the 23 National Electrification Code first. And then we can kind of look at the 2024 codes. Oftentimes, we want other communities to do those first and weed out what to take out and what's a problem, so we don't have to be the guinea pigs.
Well,
Don't be the early adopter.
Not on that one, maybe.
Second best gets the cheese.
in terms of direction, I guess it might, if we're gonna be going outside, you know, for some sort of consulting services, I mean, very, very rough numbers, but you know, budget would play a role in that, right? But I would say that it would be in the low six figures to develop that plan.
It could be, yeah, I mean, I think it depends on the scope. Yeah, I mean, these kinds of efforts are usually a little expensive, but you know, potentially worth the investment, so we'd have to really define exactly the scope of what we wanna do in a sustainable action plan. And then we'd just, you know, we'd solicit proposals through an RFP process.
I feel like DOLA or someone, when I was on the Air Quality Council, there was a group that would help out.
We have talked a little bit about, you know, there may be some DOLA programs out there,
That might help fund this.
that might help fund this. I just met with Chris LeMay, our kind of region executive yesterday to talk about a whole long list of things, but yeah, Mayor Karshbeck, obviously you were there too, but were you there yesterday?
Yeah, I was there. I was quiet.
I was like, wait a minute, what am I missing? I've had so many meetings, I can't remember what's what. But anyway, they mentioned a couple of different grant program opportunities for us to look into. So we'll be doing that over the next week or so, just to kind of see what's available to us. There may even be an opportunity through the Energy Impact Assistance Grant.
Yeah,
We
okay.
used that in the past for road construction, to repair some roads that got hammered up by oil and gas development out on the east end of town. And I don't know if that's an appropriate vehicle, because I haven't gone back through that grant process, but you know, that program is supported with money generated by the oil and gas development. It seems to me that would be a good pot of money if it's a eligible opportunity to come up with things like a sustainable action plan to deal with some of those impacts of oil and natural gas development.
I guess I'm also thinking of maybe even just using your professional Rolodex I don't know if there's any other communities here in the Front Range that have one. Maybe give them a call and say, how'd it go? Is it useful? Who'd you use? That kind of thing, what it cost.
I do know of a handful of consultants that I think do this kind of work.
Yeah.
They were helping to lead the effort. I think Trustee Murphy, you participated in, right, with some of the communities from Boulder County and Westminster and Broomfield and some of those folks. We were participants as observers, but not as active participants in the process. That was a good exercise, I think, just generally, because you know, we got to kind of see where we stacked up with everybody else, and we're actually kind of already on par with a lot of the things everyone is doing. But I think there are a handful of consultants that worked on that project that we would likely reach out to as well. So, you know, we can track down a handful, and I think we would get, you know, if we solicited proposals and we could really define, you know, what that scope looks like. And we don't, you know, we won't reinvent the wheel. We'll just go look for RFPs for sustainability action plans from other people and then peel out the pieces we think make sense for us. But I think we'll get some good responses from consulting firms. There's enough out there doing this kind of work.
I could add to that. I've been participating as an observer in that whole cohort for building codes and stuff for quite a while now. Still operating even though we don't have funding and stuff, just to kind of discuss between the communities where the code process is and how it's going. Obviously, the state is moving along with generally the code towards net zero. How fast it gets there, I don't know. But beyond that, we're just generally talking right now about, you know, how the process is going. Everyone's kind of on 21 right now for all the codes. So we are hanging in there with them. But you've got, you know, Louisville is kind of the outlier. They've gone to net zero basically right now on virtually all of their codes. They're kind of going through some things if you haven't heard on the news and stuff. So there's obviously, you know, a lot of downsides to being the first one through. And I think a lot of the communities in general are just hanging back and kind of watching how this goes down. Because there's lessons to be learned on that. But I don't think that's really hindered anyone from moving forward with these plans. Obviously, there's gonna be problems and hiccups, really upping the energy efficiency on our buildings, whether it's retrofit or new. But I think it's worth pursuing, I guess, for a lot of reasons. Environmental, energy efficiency, just cutting utilities for citizens,
Yeah, it's an energy saving things too.
so.
I agree.
But I think everyone's kind of moving in the right direction. There's a lot of benefit to, you know, municipalities having a lot of code control in Colorado. I don't wanna see that go away. I think the state would like to take a little bit more control. But it's one of those instances where I think, you know, where we can, you know, align with our fellow municipalities around here on code, there's a lot of advantages from the construction standpoint. But if we've gotta do our own thing on some of these items, I think we should, you know, so. And a lot of it's on you, Ann. So,
I was already
Not that
making
I'm
a
gonna make
list
your
over
life
here,
easy,
who
but-
else should be doing this? It's like, I can think of some other people.
no,
But every department will have an opportunity to participate.
Mhm.
Yeah.
absolutely. So, I think if we can just get the ball rolling, I think we're gonna be heading in a good direction.
No, it's so stuff that I always know, as towns grow, as cities grow, you know, parking and street and access is always a thing. I was curious, I wonder if that was included. It was, it's in here. And well, you know, business is another part of sustainability, and that's actually, you know, priority one, priority two, you know, getting businesses. So it, those are the ones that I was worried about, and it's been concluded, it's in there. So, you know, I'm fully on board. I think it's a great idea. I think net zero, as well as, you know, kind of farming out some of this work as need be to keep the momentum moving is a great plan. I think that's great.
Sounds like we're all very supportive.
Yeah.
Well, I think from a timing standpoint, I'll suggest, and you guys can tell me if we need to do something a little different. I think we can continue to gather up information about sustainable action plan scopes from other communities, and we'll try to track down prior RFPs from others who have done this, both in Colorado and other places, because this is common throughout the country, right? And kind of put together a best practice or a kind of what we think might be the best list for a scope of work, and solicit some proposals so we have an idea of what that looks like. I think from a timing standpoint, if we brought that to you at about the same time as the mid-year budget, it'd be a good time to make those adjustments. It would also give us time to track down possible grant opportunities through DOLA or others. I think there are plenty out there. We'll just have to look at when, you know, timing for when those might be available, or how quickly we could get funds to do that. Or we could choose, if the money's not a lot, we could just choose to do that ourselves too, if that's what the board wanted to do. But maybe from our perspective, the timeline goal might be to get a decent scope put together for sustainable action plan and get some proposals that we can evaluate with budget numbers in advance of the mid-year budget, which takes place kind of towards the end of July. Does that seem like a reasonable time frame to the board?
Yeah.
That's good
Thank you.
direction for us.
Awesome. This is awesome. This spreadsheet.
Yeah.
So many ways.
There's a lot to dig into in there.
Yeah,
so
I know.
If you,
It's
you
like
know, if you
just
haven't spent a
starting.
lot of time.
I like to have nuclear, or that was actually NREL, never mind. I had nuclear base loads on there. I was like, all right, what are we doing about nuclear now? Trustee Murphy?
Oh, I just had a quick question. Is there anything we can do to make things easier for you guys?
No, this is fun.
Okay.
I mean, everything that
Right.
we're doing is fun, and
All right.
you know, even with short-term rentals, Tawn is really able to utilize her expertise.
Yeah. Sure.
Lessons learned from Larimer County, what's going to be best for Berthoud, kind of looking at some of those base items, but this is where we really get to see what the vision and value is for the town, and how can we implement it, and how can we be, you know, agents of change and making things better for everyone. So this is the fun stuff. So thank you for all
Thank
your
you.
support.
Well, thanks for everything. covered both of these. Must have missed anything? All right, I'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting. Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good study session.
What happened in Louisville?
I learned.
I'm actually
Yeah, what happened in Louisville? Dave?